Hello, this is Joy from the future. Not really, this is Joy from the present. The Joy in the video with the llama shirt, she's from the past, like a month ago. And then present day Joy just got around to editing this video. Anyway, I have heard from multiple sources that today is World Autism Awareness Day. However, I am not planning to celebrate it as it is purported by Autism Speaks. I will be doing, however, in June, a full week in which I answer your questions live. If you are interested in me answering your questions about autism and autistic characters, please feel free to leave comments down in my videos. I will only be taking questions from the comments section, so feel free to do that. I am very excited to educate people and help them portray and represent people like me better. Alright, on with the video. Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. So I know it has been a while. I'm currently working on my sprites so that I can work on, more scripted videos, but I wanted to do this off-the-cuff video first off because I haven't updated in forever and I don't think that that's a good thing. And also because I have learned something so important recently in my writing journey with Starwalker that I think will be very beneficial for you guys to hear. So for those of you who are not caught up on current events, which is probably most of you because I'm not sure how many readers of Allura I have on YouTube, I will be linking Allura down in the description box if you want to read it, because it will be very important and there will be spoilers for both Allura and the beta draft of Starwalker. So let me explain what I mean by that. So as you guys know, I've been working on Starwalker, the sequel to Allura in my Allura trilogy. If you don't know what that is, it's basically a trilogy I'm making. I started it just as a standalone, but after season 5, I was very dissatisfied with the way Shadow Weaver's arc went, and thus I decided that I was going to fix it myself in my books. So I finished Allura and I started on Starwalker in August 2020. However, I made some massive mistakes that warranted me needing to rewrite it twice instead of the usual one time. Both of my novels before then, Allura and then The Last Kaimali, they only needed one rewrite. Starwalker will need 2 because I made some very big mistakes that I want to talk about today in hopes that you can avoid them in your own stories. So let's start with the beta draft of Starwalker is currently only available to people who have read Allura before, and this is because I don't want to release it to the internet. I have a very write first and ask questions later mentality, and that can cause me to write some things that could come off as offensive or roughly done, and I don't want people to judge my writing quality based off of that. Thus, I will not be linking Starwalker Prime, which is the beta draft, that's what I'm going to call it in this video, just for everybody to see. However, if you have read Allura, please leave a comment down below or DM me on Wattpad, and I will be willing to give you a link to my Discord server where you'll be able to read that if you have read Allura and you're interested in that. So with that being said, there will be spoilers from here on out. Be prepared for that. The plot for the new draft of Starwalker is going to be very different, hardly recognizable from Starwalker Prime. So if you are wanting to avoid spoilers for 3.0, I would suggest that you rest easy. I'm not going to be spoiling anything that's going to be retained in 3.0. With that being said, that is a long intro. Let's get into it. So the first issue that Starwalker Prime had was that I had a very faulty outline. So I outlined this book right after I finished doing a second editing sweep of Allura in my summer book club on Wattpad. So I had just started with Starwalker and the outlining. I outlined it over the course of around 30 days, and I foolishly assumed that Starwalker was going to be a similar length to Allura. Allura is 54,000 words long. And so I assumed it was going to be a similar length to Allura. That did not end up being the case because it turns out I have 4 main characters in Starwalker. You have Micah, Shadow Weaver, Nell, and Carmen. And those are just the major characters. I learned from Brandon Sanderson, who is one of my favorite authors of all time. Brandon Sanderson, in his annotations on the Mistborn trilogy, mentioned that he sometimes includes a few scenes from a minor character's point of view just to give another perspective on the world. And I think that that's really helpful, and that was something I wanted to incorporate. However, I didn't realize that until much later. So that was one problem with the outline. And another problem with the outline is that I had a very weak conflict. So for those of you who are not on my Discord server, if you are, then you will be getting a lot of stuff that I have mentioned before. But if you are not on my Discord server, then the basic idea of Starwalker is that 5 years has passed since the Spell of Obtainment. Micah and Shadow Weaver are on opposite sides of the war, and Micah does not know who Shadow Weaver is. He doesn't know her true identity as his teacher, Emmeth Lightspinner. And so that knowledge, he doesn't find that out until the climax of the story. And I believe that was the biggest thing that dragged the draft down, because for every page that he doesn't know who she is, I can't have any direct relational conflict between them. And so it caused a bit of a problem. As far as creating that conflict goes. And of course, if you can't have conflict between your two leads in your story, you're going to have to force it in other places. And that's what I did. I didn't realize this consciously until much later, but I had several things that were very weird and out of place conflicts, but I had to include them and force them to work, because otherwise there would be no conflict at all in the story. So I think definitely in the first draft, Micah and Angela, I had planned for them to have a struggling marriage, which is not how the source material I was writing from, and they don't have a struggling marriage in the show, but I tried to force them to have a struggling marriage even when they didn't want to have conflict, and it was very, very painful to write. I remember slogging through the first two drafts and being just I couldn't figure out what was wrong, but my brain knew that something was wrong, and it was just all-consuming. Another conflict that I had was with Nell and Micah. So if you don't know, Micah and Nell are friends, but Micah does not know about Nell's history as Allura Lightspinner, Shadow Weaver's former fiancé. And so this still causes problems between them in 3.0, but I tried to force Nell to behave in a way and to drive a wedge between him and Micah that didn't feel natural for the story. And then finally, I believe that the biggest thing was probably Shadow Weaver and Carmen. And I honestly think, in retrospect, that the way I portrayed them was a bit problematic. Carmen is her servant, but naturally, Shadow Weaver does an oopsie and becomes even worse than she is at the beginning of the book. And I had wanted to make them have kind of a friction between them, but this was more of a problem of me not knowing what I was doing at the time. And so because of that, it was again, very forced, very weird and difficult. There were other minor problems too that if you read Starwalker Prime, you will understand. Those are just a few examples. So my thing is I had a rushed and faulty outline, but I want to zoom in on each of these problems that I had as a result of this faulty outline. First one, using characters as puppets. Part of this is that I have less experience with original characters than I would like. So after the Allura trilogy, I will be working on the Mage of Fire trilogy, which is completely original. I'm working on the lore for it. It's basically going to be an epic fantasy / sci-fi story. It's going to be great. But I have less experience with original characters than I would like. And sometimes it just takes you longer than you want it to figure out where your characters are going. That was very true with Nell and Carmen. I made tweaks to both of them for the next draft of Starwalker. And I think that part of the issue was that I was forcing the characters to work in a plot that didn't work in general. Like the conflict was too weak, and there were things that happened in the story that just didn't work. And so I think that this should be a lesson. You shouldn't plan more than you have figured out, and it's better to not have an outline than to have an outline and it not to work. I don't know if that makes sense. I find that I do best with vague outlines, so I outline things scene by scene, but I don't really talk too much about the characters and their thought processes in the outline. I kind of just let that build on itself. That means sometimes the plot just changes, and I have to be okay with that. But for some reason, I didn't want to be okay with that, and it caused a problem. The next thing is not planning enough in the crucial places and planning too much in the wrong places. So let's talk about the first issue, not planning enough in the right places. I didn't know what the Horde's overarching goal was for this story. Okay, so, the Horde, this fascist army, they're bent on conquering all of Etheria for authoritarian purposes, but I hadn't figured out how exactly they would do that and what their overarching plan was for the story. And as a result, the Horde battles are just kind of this mess of scattered attacks until the great epic battle in the snows. And it's just, there's nothing for the Horde to be working toward. There's nothing for the rebellion to be working against, really, except for the nebulous goal of, taking over Etheria. So that was a big problem with the outline. And on the converse, I planned too much in the wrong places. I tried to plan out every character arc step by step, and this works for some people, to be clear. That's why those exist, is to help the obsessive planners. But I found that for me, I was subconsciously fighting my natural processes and trying to make things work when they just wouldn't, or they didn't want to. And that happened with the character arcs. I had a point where they would learn something at each beat where I had planned in the story, but I never stopped to consider that it might be better to just let them learn things like as you go, as you take the journey too, and then maybe you can even learn something from them as well. And so basically the summary of that point is not don't use an outline or follow me. It's just don't fight against your natural processes. Don't do it. It never ends well. So, and then the final thing is the pacing. So the pacing of Starwalker Prime it's better than the first draft, I will say that, but it's still not perfect. So what happened in the first draft was that I had expected it to be 54,000 words long, similar length to Allura. However, that didn't happen because I have 4 main characters. And when you have 4 main characters, you're naturally going to have more plots to tie up, more arcs to look at, and stuff like that. But once I figured out that the pacing was off, which I luckily figured out very quickly as I was writing the first draft in August, I didn't flesh out the story and start over like I should have. I wasn't very far into the draft when I realized the pacing was off. I could have just started over, and because I binge write very quickly on rough drafts, it wouldn't have been a problem. But instead, I figured I could fix it with a few extra scenes. But I didn't structure the subplots very well. Subplots in novel writing are so important. And I think that that's what a lot of new writers miss and why they can't stay invested in their novels. Subplots are basically, for those who don't know, they're smaller sub-stories within the larger plot. So for example, in Allura, you have the subplot alongside Lightspinner learning to navigate her place in the guild and her place that she believes she belongs as a fighter against the Horde. In the midst of that, you also have her growing relationship with Micah. And as a result of that, it's not the main part of the plot, but it's still greatly important to her character. But without but at the same time, without Micah there, her arc falls apart, you see. But in Starwalker, instead of making those important subplots and letting them unfold on their own and making them integral to the experience, I kind of just had a few throwaway scenes where the characters were just doing nothing and thinking about things. Now, to be clear, there are plenty of times, or there are a few times, when characters thinking about something and not doing a whole lot for the story, it's not always bad. Brandon Sanderson, again, I keep plugging Brandon Sanderson's work because his work is so good. But he makes great use of this in his Mistborn trilogy. However, I was way overusing this to the point where the scenes where I was doing just introspective stuff, they just felt dull, even to me. And if I, the writer, am feeling this way, then the reader's gonna feel this way too. And so I didn't use meaningful subplots that were integral to the story and crucial for the plot. I mostly used throwaway scenes that didn't really accomplish much. And sometimes you need a throwaway scene or two to get a point across or strengthen a character, but you shouldn't rely on those for anything that isn't the main plot, and I was doing that. So let that be a warning. Do not do throwaway scenes and stupid subplots. I would advise you, make sure all your subplots are integral to the main story. If you can cut out the subplot and the story still works fine, or the story is just as interesting without it, you don't have a very good subplot. And so I think that is a good lesson for writers to learn. So in short, there were 3 problems. 1, I was using my characters as puppets. 2, I was not doing enough planning in the areas that needed it, and I was doing too much in the areas that weren't good to plan for. And 3, I wasn't using good subplots when I started outlining. And as a result, I had a rushed and faulty outline, which warranted the need to rewrite Starwalker twice. Luckily now I have an outline that is almost recognizable from the current one as far as the plot goes, and I am doing very well on my beginnings with it and writing it, and so I believe that this will be the last rewrite, but don't quote me on that. I would love to hear your thoughts. If you would like to read Allura, there will be a link to that down in the description box. I will be moving it to AO3 once I finish the trilogy, because I plan to revise it and do a second edition and post that on AO3. That will be quite a while out from now, but I'm hoping you guys will stick around to either read it on Wattpad or read it once it comes out on AO3. Thank you so much for watching this video. I promise I will get my sprites done quickly, and then I will be able to do those beautiful analysis videos I have been yearning to do. As always, thank you for watching, and God bless you all.